Hey everyone, Moses here again. I wanted to make a short video in relation to settings and just making some tweaks to the game that may help you. I've picked up a lot of these tips just along the way and through experimentation, and I thought I'd share it with you. So let's jump in. So we're going to start at the controls, and we're going to go through all, except for the key bindings, we're going to go through some of the changes I've made in just the option settings. This is the easiest way to kind of make some tweaks to the game that may make the visual and control aspects a little bit better. Very easy to control. You might not be able to click a button to make you aim better, but you can definitely click a button to make some real good changes in the game that have been beneficial to me. So we'll start with controls. So we're going to take a look at sensitivity first. I play with a low sensitivity. If you have the space or are used to playing with a low sensitivity already, that is definitely preferable to having a high sensitivity. Everyone's different. Everyone has different experience. Don't get me wrong. However, low sensitivities allow you to make finesse movements, especially with precise aiming like scouts. A low sensitivity will allow your aiming to be a little bit more precise. Your mouse movements won't overshoot or undershoot your target because you're having to really try to get that reticle on the target first. And that leads to a lot of good habit creation, like aiming at your target prior to going down the scope. But yeah, I play with a low sensitivity. Generally speaking, you'll need a good mouse with DPI control as well as a large area in which to move your mouse, so you're not constantly resetting in a small area, which would lead to just poor performance. My vehicle mouse sensitivity is set to 50%. I only use my mouse for tank and ground vehicle gameplay. I don't use it for flight. I use an Xbox controller for that. Again, this is personal preference, but it's good to be able to have this a little higher because typically speaking, you're not having to aim as precisely with turrets as you are with your soldier. Again, this is a personal preference, so you can set this as necessary. Raw mouse input is set to on because we do not want any acceleration on our mouse input. Vibration is a controller setting. Inversion is again a personal preference. This just makes down, up, up, down, that kind of thing. Soldier's stick sensitivity. This is a controller setting. I leave this alone. Again, I mentioned I fly with a controller for aircraft. I have this set to 100%. It is not a crazy amount of sensitivity. It just allows for 100% maneuverability of your aircraft. You want this 100% if you're flying with an Xbox controller because you just want that responsiveness. Soldier zoom sensitivity is at 100%. Again, because I play at a low sensitivity already. I would just leave this at 100% because you want fluidity and just continuation of your aiming sensitivity regardless of whether you're scoped or not, just for muscle memory purposes. These are all personal preference and are self-explanatory. So moving into the advanced settings, again, stick dead zone, you want this as small as possible. I have some weird glitch with my mouse when I set it to 0, so it's at 1%. Maybe you can set it to 0%. It's not a big deal. The idea here is that you want that responsiveness on the sticks. You don't want any dead zone because that could mean getting out of a turn safely or not getting out of a turn safely depending on the responsiveness. You can also set up your controller, your zoom sensitivity depending on the scope you're using. So if you're playing a lot of scout with the sniper variants, you'll be getting up past that 4%, that 4 times zoom. You can set the sensitivity there. So that's a real personal preference. I won't talk about that too much. So all my sensitivities are 100% through the vehicles. You can set up again individual sensitivities depending on what you're using. The only thing I would recommend looking at is tank sensitivity, and then again at your vehicle overall sensitivity. It really depends on your control setup, and because control setups are so personal, we'll move on. So vehicle aim, relative control, and decoupling aiming from turning as both a driver and a passenger. I'm only going to focus on these two right here because they're super important. What you want to do is turn this to on first of all, and the reason for that is simple. If you are, for instance, a tail gunner in an aircraft and you're trying to fight off a fighter, The aircraft will be turning in evasion tactics, typically with a driver that's trying to not get shot down, and because of that, if this is set to off, your aim will be affected by the movements of the vehicle. Essentially, what this makes is your aim independent of the movement of the vehicle. So that is a very important setting. This should be on. This will allow engaging enemy aircraft to be much easier, and will lead to a lot better success in the air when gunning. As well as as a bomber front gunner, this is extremely useful. So uniform soldier aiming. This is something that I've been working on, or testing rather, over the last couple of days. I have mine set to on and the coefficient set to 0. Now the default coefficient is, I think, 133. Essentially, again, this is a sneaky form of mouse acceleration. So your aim may not feel particularly smooth when aiming through your sights or down the scope. So we want to set this to 0. I can't quantify it because this is their description is just, I don't know, it's not super helpful. I think the best thing is that it says this helps with muscle memory for aiming, but setting mine to 0 has made my aiming a lot smoother, and it just feels better. So my eye test says that 0% is the way to go. So that's my preference. Give it a shot. Let me know if it works for you. So we're going to jump down into gameplay. A lot of this stuff is kind of self-explanatory and, again, personal preference. One real good tip here is increasing the minimap size from its default 100% down here to 150%. Now this gives your minimap a lot more size, 50% more, obviously, and it makes the minimap a good size without being too without it encroaching on your visual, what you can see playing the game. Having a larger minimap will allow you to see more enemy soldiers around you when spotting flares are down. You may see other players on YouTube playing with this setting. It's great. You can also change the zoom radius, whether you're in a vehicle or on foot. I have left mine at the default, but again, you can mess with this to your leisure. You can increase it, decrease it. I leave mine here. It helps keep you focused on what's pertinent without getting your eyes stuck to the minimap all the time. So I have my stationary weapons set to all. That way you're not, if you're in flight or just running around, you're not missing out on HMG emplacements or anything like the field guns. Just set it to all. That way you can see everything on the minimap. Other than that, there's opacity settings. You can kind of mess around, customize your kill color. Mine's green. I don't know. I'm a beautiful and unique snowflake. So again, all this stuff, context-based order giving, it's all whatever. One thing that I would turn off is plane chase camera roll. So essentially what this means, I'll read it off the description. Choose whether the plane's third-person chase camera rolls with the plane. You want this to know. You want your visual, what you see on the screen to be as consistent as possible for a control aspect. So set that to no. That way your look isn't inverting over and over again. That'll make that, at least for me, makes it a lot easier to control my aircraft. Before, when it was rolling over the place, I found myself lawn darting a lot. So try and avoid that. Yeah, this is I believe this is control related, so we don't want that. Xbox controller related. So moving on to the audio aspect. Not too much to speak about here. You can turn your game announcer voice off if you're super annoyed by that smug British lady telling you you're losing. You can turn her off. And you can also make everyone speak English because, America. But anyway, video. This setting right here is what I'll start with. I'm not colorblind, so this setting makes the minimap icons and the in-game icons a lot more visible, a lot easier to see. On the default settings, they're a light blue color, and they're kind of like a muted version of their color without any borders around them, or very small borders. What Tritnopia, the setting I use, does, it really makes the icons pop. And while in the air and on the ground, you want as much visual fidelity for enemy movements as possible. Just to touch on some of these other settings, I play borderless because I have to. It just, my video capture card won't pick up my video signal, and it messes with my resolution. There have been reported FPS benefits to playing borderless, but a lot of this stuff is dependent on your system. Just to touch on the FOV angle, I use 90. I think the default is like 70 something, but I play 90 both on the ground and in vehicles. It just gives you the best, it's the sweet spot, if I were to call it anything, between that fisheye look of having a large field of view and having a limited field of view, which can be detrimental to your performance. All motion blur should be set to 0. It might look cool, but you don't want motion blur. It messes with the visuals and it can obscure enemy players. Not something you want when you're sprinting a lot. So moving on to advanced, again, this is all personal preference. Resolution scale, UI scale, 100%, 50%. This all depends on your system, so I won't spend too much time there. Yeah, so that's kind of it. Key bindings, I don't have any real great tips there. However, if you are a mouse and keyboard pilot, it may seem like you're having to move your mouse around a lot when making turns and having to lift it up. One tip that is really handy is binding your pitch up to a key on the keyboard. Now, mine is set to W. A lot of people say to set it to Shift or spacebar, whatever you want to use. I think Shift is a great one because there is no sprinting in vehicles. There's no turbo boost unless you're in a specific fighter. Either way, that is a different key entirely. As well as having your rolls bound to D and A respectively for right and left. DICE, being the terrible people that they are, don't go left and right like I think every other game. They go right and left. So you can just keep that in mind when you're setting these settings, because I made that mistake and immediately crashed into the ground. So again, setting your pitch up and pitch down to keys on the keyboard have been helpful. I still prefer the controller. It's really up to you, but binding pitch up to a key on your keyboard will make turning a lot easier. That's kind of it, guys. So I appreciate you taking the time to watch the video. If any of this was helpful, or if you have tips of your own that you'd like to share, please send a comment onto the video, or send me a PM. Anything. If you have me on Twitch, send me a message in the chat. Otherwise, hit that like button, subscribe to me on YouTube, and you can watch me on Twitch TV at WTF Moses. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll talk to you next time.